Hello! Last week's project got a little, controversial, so this week we're doing whatever the hell I feel like. And I really mean that. I went primer shopping because I needed a purplish primer for a project that's upcoming. No spoilers. And this was the only one they had. Technically it's aubergine, but that works. And we're gonna use Mollog's Mob as an excuse to test this primer alongside, just as many colors as we can. And before I forget, my name is Richard, the channel is called New Memphis, and I am so glad that you could be here today. Let's get down to business. Don't worry, I'll give you time to subscribe. I grabbed every single primer that I either had or could buy that I thought would look good alongside our, I want to call it purple, aubergine. Aubergine, what a weird word, aubergine. We have Macragge Blue, which we've used on a couple of projects. We have our Leafy Green primer, which we used most recently on some of the Cruel Boys, but we've also used on the 100% plant-based Necron army. We have White, which I just bought because I was completely out and I just needed white primer, so fuck it, why not test out the can? And then we have Chrome, which we, I don't think we've used this since Blackstone Fortress, since the Spindle Drones and the Space Marines that we painted. Man! Remember that, like, one time I painted Space Marines? Man, that was nuts. And it wasn't even regular Space Marines, it was Chaos. We still haven't painted regular Space Marines on this channel. Whoops! Not out of anything against Space Marines, just it slipped my mind. Hasn't been a model that I thought, yeah, I gotta paint that yet. I don't know, maybe someday soon. Now, the paint list is pretty short this time, and that is intentional. Obviously, the primer, this aubergine, is what we're here to test out and see, you know, what looks good with it. So that's kind of, you know, what I was going for. So, you know, I wanted to make sure that we didn't have too many paints covering it up. Mollog himself ended up a little greener than I wanted, but we did get some really, really interesting things out of this. The Bat Squig, I think, especially turned out well. I guess that does make the short paint list a little misleading because we have all these different primers. I don't usually list primers on the side because, gotta be honest, it just makes the list longer and more confusing, but you can see them here. I want to make sure that you guys know. And like I said, I got some really interesting ideas out of this project that I'm excited to take into the future. So, with that in mind, let's just go ahead and get started. You know, I think the one time I'm not going to use this is when pouring the beer. I don't think that would be a great flavor. 312 once again. Totally missed the trash can. Oh well. We are, for like the third time this summer, going through yet another record-breaking heat wave. Great. Thanks, Midwest. God, just look at that. I'm sorry. I know I stop every time to like admire how good the beer looks out of this perfectly frosted mug, but my God, give it some credit, guys. It's so good. Let's get started. Warhammer Underworlds is criminally underrated, or at least the minis are. Mollog's Mob here is one of my favorites, and they have been sitting in my pile of shame for far too long. So, I gave them their first layer of primer, and I quite like the color actually. I hadn't seen it before this, and they look great. It should work out very nicely for my next project. Now I'll give them a blast of their secondary color from the top. Once again, we have Macragge Blue, Leafy Green, White, and Chrome. The blue immediately sticks out as something special, and I am very excited to take it to a future project, but we have 4 other minis to finish first. For Mollog himself, I decided to use light green for the highlights on his mushrooms, and then we'll switch over to flat green to highlight his skin and muscles. The flat green ended up covering way too much of the primer, but I'll remember that for next time. And honestly, I didn't really like the leafy green paired with aubergine, so it's fine. Screamer Pink should help make some of the smaller accents pop. Then we'll use medium flesh tone on the trinkets and Mollog's loincloth. and blue-green to accent the top of our bat squig. I said this one turned out especially well. I wanted to paint the rocky bases in gray, but my London gray is almost out, so we'll just mix up a little gray on the fly. I truly cannot imagine a color that would be harder to screw up than gray. At the last minute, I decided to return to Screamer Pink to paint Mollog's captured friend here, as well as the bottom of the bat squig. Just a few quick highlights. And now we can finally use our black wash. I spent quite a while making sure it was just the right consistency. I usually use 2 parts matte medium, sometimes 3, 1 part paint, and then the amount of water can vary pretty widely depending on the actual paint itself. The best advice I could possibly give about mixing washes is just to test it, and test it again until it's right. Then it can go on the models. Nice. Those gave us the shadows we needed, but I definitely want to dry brush the bases with whites to help the individual rocks stand out. And for any places where the dry brush was too much, we can always mix a bit more black wash and add it to the recesses. I grabbed Vallejo Silver next for highlights on the stalag squid. Try saying that 5 times fast. Then Screamer Pink once more for all the areas we used it on previously. Same for medium flesh tone. I loved how this looked on the teeth. Then light green makes its return to start these mushrooms all the bases have. We'll paint even more of the mushrooms with dark vermilion. There are quite a few of them. And finally, lemon yellow, which we will also use to highlight the trinkets again. I want them to stand out a bit from the medium flesh tone that we used on the ropes. Our spite shroom need a little bit of white, and so do the skulls and teeth. Plus the spots on these mushrooms will get some white too. And finally, for the puddle at Mollog's feet, we'll add whitewash to the area. And once it's dry, add some blue-green. Gotta say, Aubergine, you did a pretty good job. It turned out really well, and I'm actually excited to use this in the future. Like I said though, that pairing of this with the Macragge blue is gonna be a not quite a zenithal highlight, but a gradient that I definitely want to try out in the future. I've got some ideas that I got specifically from this project. I also really liked the white pairing. That also turned out very, very well, and I'm not sure exactly when I would use this, because this was the most harsh, aside from maybe the chrome. So I'm not sure when I would ever use it, but man, it also looked very, very good on the spite shroom. Chrome was okay. I mean, chrome in general is a pretty specific paint to be using, so it looked good on this project. I'm not sure if we'll use it again. The leafy green, tragically, the one we used on Mollog himself, was my least favorite by far, which sucks. But if I ever need to, I don't know, paint a watermelon or something, I'll come back to this combination. Anyway, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. You have been amazing. I have been Richard, and I'll see you guys in the next one.